Hey, it's Chris here with Off-Road Farm, and on today's video, we're going to put on these new heavy-duty front shackles from Offroad Design. Some new 4-inch lift springs from Tough Country. This is for the front. We're also going to add some greasable bushings from Offroad Design. Also, a 1-inch zero rate add-a-leaf. It's essentially a lift block from Offroad Design as well. And while we're at it, let's get this Dana 60 back underneath this truck. Follow along. All right, so we're getting ready to take out these bolts here at the back. The bottom one is a 7/8 and a 13/16 on the inside. And up top we have an 11/16 on the outside and a 5/8 on the inside. So up front, the sizes are the same, but you can't get the wrench on the inside, so we're just going to reverse. We're going to use a 7/8 wrench and a 13/16 socket. Alright, so I'm getting ready to drive out these bolts so I can get this spring out of here. Now, I did go with the heavy-duty front shackles with greasable bushings from Offroad Design. So since I'm doing that, I'm only going to worry with knocking out this top bolt. I'm not going to worry about this one, since I don't need to reuse the shackle or the bolt or the bushing. The other side literally just fell out. There we go. Alright, springs are out. So as part of the lift kit that I got from Offroad Design, I also went ahead and upgraded to these heavy-duty front shackles. I mean, you can just see the difference in the thickness of the actual shackle. Plus, on the top bolt that goes through the frame, they actually make that a larger bolt as two, as you can tell just the difference in those bolts. And they're also greasable. So, in order to get all this stuff installed, we need to knock out the old bushing in the shackle hanger on the frame. The directions in the Offroad Design kit say first we need to drive out this inner sleeve, then we can chunk out the old rubber bushing. Let's see how that goes.
So right here is where I made a mistake. I went and I grabbed a big piece of bar to try to drive through this bushing, and it was too big. I had to drive it through the bushing to get that inner sleeve out, and then it did work. It got that inner sleeve out and also the other side of the bushing. But then I had to fight, and I mean fight, to get this outer half of that bushing and that rod driven back out of there. So I do not recommend to try this method unless you just happen to have a punch that's just the perfect size that'll fit through that bushing but still catch that inner sleeve. So I tried driving that bar through that bushing quite a bit so I could try to hammer it back out. It worked a little bit. The bushing maybe came out like maybe 1/8 of an inch, maybe 3/16, and then it would just stop and the bar would slip through it. But then you couldn't get to the bar to drive it all the way out. So I ended up just locking a pair of vice grips on it as tight as I could get them. Was able to wiggle it back and forth, And then I was also able to take that hammer and tap on those vice grips, and I did finally get it out. But what I recommend is to try to cut a chunk out of this bushing like I'm getting ready to show you.
So over here on the passenger side, I was able to drive the sleeve out on this side, but it didn't take the inside bushing with it.
Now the reason we want to cut a chunk out of it is because if you just try to squeeze these with some vice grips, yeah, you can get it to move a little bit, but you could probably eventually fight it and get it out. But once we cut a chunk in it, it'll come out a lot easier. So I just used a Sawzall here. Just be careful. Try not to cut any gouges in the actual metal sleeve. And once you make 2 cuts in it, hopefully you can drive that out with a punch.
So after I get that one piece cut out, I knocked it out with a punch. Now I can just grab it with some vice grips and turn it. Pull it out. Then we'll just drive out the other side. Now when you're going to order this, you do need to know, are you going to stay with your stock springs, or do you already have aftermarket, or are you going to go to aftermarket? The reason is because there's actually a different size bushing depending on stock springs or aftermarket springs. So we're going to go ahead and get these bushings ready to go in the frame. So according to the directions, we need ORD 2196, which is stamped on the inside of the bushing here. So we're just going to go ahead and give everything a light little coat of grease, but everything slides together a little bit easier. All right, let's go put these bushings in the frame. Just going to put in our inside bushing first. We also need to replace these bushings in the back of the front springs. So I got my leaf pack clamped down to a table here, and I'm just going to drive out the center sleeve. Now the easiest way I found to pull out these bushings is with a pair of vice grips. Give it a twist, then they'll come right out of there. So just like before, just gonna pre-grease everything. Now that everything's greased up, just go ahead and put them in here.
Whenever you're driving in the center sleeve, don't drive it all the way through. You want to get it started just a little bit and then go ahead and put in the other half of your bushing and then drive that center sleeve the rest of the way through.
So part of the lift process for this front end, I put in greasable bushings in the back, but not on the front, the main eye of this spring. So we're going to do that now. Pump pliers, spin it and kind of pull up a little bit. And that'll come right out. And then we'll just flip it over. Do the same thing. And it'll come right out. And these are these new Kevlar bushings from Offroad Design. They'll just go right in there. And now whenever we hang our spring back, we'll have greasable bushings on the back of the truck and on the front of the truck, but most importantly on both ends of the front springs. So another thing I want to do on this front end is I want to install these zero rate add-a-leaf, I think is what they call it. These are from Offroad Design. They're essentially a lift block. It has a couple different holes in it. It has the center pin hole, and then it also has offset. So you can offset your front end an inch or an inch and a half, either way if you want to. I think I'm just going to run with it just in the middle, just like it has been, because the whole time I've been trying to shorten this truck up as much as I can, so I don't really want to lengthen it up any. If I were to scoot my front end out an inch or an inch and a half, it would probably help me with some clearance whenever it comes to tires and turning. But we're just going to try it like this and see how it does. So here's how we do it. First thing we're going to do is we're going to clamp this leaf pack together. I just use these welding clamps, is essentially what it is. So make sure you got room to get in there.
Just a quick note here. If all you're going to be doing is adding one of these zero rates, you can use welding clamps. But if you're going to be breaking this spring pack down, make sure you use a C-clamp so you can slowly let off the pressure on those springs.
Alright, so now we're ready. Now let me show you how these work. So your center pin obviously goes in the center, and if you want to run it, everything in the center, then that's all you have to do. Just put your new center pin in, go ahead and put it through your leaves, tighten it down. If you decide you want to offset it, the top of this block, and you can tell it's the top, you see these nice rounded corners, those go towards the leaf pack. That makes sure that we're not causing any additional stress in our leaves when it's flexing. So if you want to offset it, you go ahead and you put your center pin in, you lock it down with your nut, and you cut the top of it off flush so that it's not protruding above the top. Then, whichever way you want to offset it, you put your bolt through. You notice it sits below the bottom, and then that's going to go through the center of your leaf spring, and that will allow you to offset either way you want to, either an inch or an inch and a half. But I'm just going to run mine in the center. So now we're ready to hang our new springs back. Now these are the new springs that I bought through Offroad Design. They're the 4-inch, I think they're Tough Country. And they also have the 1-inch zero rate add-a-leaves. And I've got greasable bushings front and back. Alright, so now we're going to hang this spring up on this front hanger. Now whenever I took these off, the nuts were in this little recess right here, but this time I'm going to install these bolts the other way. I'm hoping that this will help protect these grease fittings. Now that we've got our springs hung back, now let's try to get this Dana 60 back where it goes.
When it's time to bolt your axle back up, you obviously try to get it as close as you can to your spring purchase, but you're probably not going to get it perfect. Well, if you need to adjust it left or right a little bit, either take a good big heavy screwdriver or a pry bar and you can stick it underneath one tire and lift it up, and you'd be surprised you can actually scoot that axle pretty easily. side to side, just a little bit at a time to help you get everything lined up better.
So when I originally planned this, I wasn't planning on doing those 1-inch zero rate adder leaves for my ORD. So whenever I blocked this thing up, I didn't account for that extra inch. So what I'm doing is just using a block of wood, and I'm jacking up, putting some pressure on that one leaf spring, and it's actually picking this side of the truck up just a little bit to where I can roll this side. If I can get one side in at a time, I'm actually really close. Let's see what happens. I'll let it down just a little bit. It's not in there, it's the problem. So now that we've got the axle close to the right place, we need to cut off this center pin. It's too tall, so we can put these plates on and start mounting up our U-bolts. Alright, so we got the axle now. It's pretty close. It's not perfect, but it's close enough we can start. I've already got the U-bolts on the other side. If I remember on this thing is 60, on the passenger side, since this is a passenger side drop, it's got these two studs that have to go in the actual housing. So what I've done is I've taken two of my nuts and I've locked them together. So now we're going to put these studs in. I got some Loctite on there. I would recommend just to start on the back one. Just make it a little bit easier to get to both of them that way. That's a 15/16.
According to Offroad Design, you don't have to torque these studs super tight. They just recommend put some Loctite on it. That will help seal that hole, and then just get them snug.
Let it sit in there pretty tight. Now we'll just unjam these nuts. We'll do the same thing for the front one. Alright, so now we're just going to go ahead and we'll put on our washers and our nuts just loosely. Now remember, if you buy the kit, there'll be one U-bolt that is wider than the others. This wider one goes around this casing down here. We'll have to tap it in a little bit. We probably have to give it a little squeeze together to get it in.
Last thing we need to do is we need to torque these nuts down on the U-bolts to 130 foot-pounds, and that's with dry threads. I'm going to leave a link down below to this lift kit from Offroad Design. You guys should check it out.
Thanks for watching, everybody. If you like this video, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos like it, please hit that subscribe button down below.